Alright, so we're going to start my process on how to make those explosive pellets that we've seen before. First, let's start off with the pellet that I normally use because I have no other use for it, which is these Crossman SSP. Turn it over so you guys can see it properly. Crossman SSP or supersonic pellet. These are high velocity pellets. They weigh a whopping 4 grains. That's it. 4 grains. I don't know if you can see that properly right there. But yeah, 4 grains. All they weigh. And as it stands, they are pretty much useless for anything else other than maybe injuring an animal without killing it. But they do have a very nice flat base. They are light, so the added weight won't do anything to them. they actually benefit from the added weight. Here we have the primers. Put these are the frame. These are the small pistol primers that I use for this, and I do use a CCI. Alright, disclaimer time, folks. We are not responsible here for any injuries that occur if you try to replicate this process. This is only for information purposes. Please wear iPro protective gear if you do try this at home, which I recommend you don't, unless you're super confident, but at the same time, be safe. Have common sense. We're not responsible for any injuries or maybe even death that might occur if anything goes wrong with the replication of this process. Please stay safe and thank you. A little expensive, but they're the only ones that can find it. So all I do here is get some of that super glue. Where's my super glue? There it is. I use my Gorilla super glue. And what I do is I get it, tiniest little dab. Let me see if I can zoom in on this right here. Tiniest little dab. I don't even let the whole thing bead up. I just get, as soon as a little tiny amount comes out, not even a drop. That's all you need right there. And what I do at this point, this has that little drop. I connect it to the back end, the striking end of the pellet. Trying to keep it perfectly lined up, and not to get my hand glued to the pellet. You only get a small window with this. Unfortunately, this is the best glue I could find for this project. Most other glues are too thick, they take so long to cure, there's too much wait time involved in getting it set that you run the risk of it sliding around and not being centered. So now I leave it upside down because the heavier part is the bottom. It was that primer. The primer is a lot heavier than the actual pellet. I do have another pellet that I've used before. I've used the hollow point pellet, the destroyer, because it has that tip in the middle. But I did not use those for the Mark II. I've only used them for the Mark I, which is the Mark I. Let me zoom back out. The Mark I has the primer facing the opposite direction. So what it is, Mark II looks like this. You see the anvil, it's like I just showed you. Mark I is reversed. It's a closed head. The striking end is forward. You can see. So yeah, the striking end would be forward. The problem with this is if the target that you're hitting doesn't have a hard surface right off the bat, the pellet won't, the primer won't go off, so you don't get an explosion. So what and this one was great for the Mark I, so was the destroyer, because it has that little rim right there, kind of tapers down. And this pellet is actually the where's that top to this pellet case? Right here. The Stoger X Speed has that little tapering, which allows it to like fit almost perfectly on there. Lines up just very, very nicely. I might make one Mark 1 just for kind of just for comparison. So let's see. That glue in the chamber. Spread it around the rim there. It's the tiniest amount, too much and it'll goop up and it'll change the diameter of the actual pellet and it won't fit in the breech. Had that happen a few times with Mark 1 and the Mark 2 where there was just too much adhesive. So now try and line it up perfectly before you let it set. There it is, and that's a Mark 1. So we'll shoot that one at the Ballistics gel too, just to show the difference in reaction between the Mark 1 and Mark 2. I'm going to make a few more Mark 2s. I'm going to make a Mark 2 with the lead pellet, with this pellet. Because it has a flat head, you can still make the Mark 2 with it. The other ones, it's very difficult to make a Mark 2 with the other ones because they don't have a flat head. If it has a pointed end or a rounded end, it's gonna be almost impossible to level. So you already saw this in real time. I'm going to try to keep these as level as possible. About 1 in 5 of these, 20%, end up not being able to fit down the breech. But for the ones that do are so well dialed in, they actually have consistent accuracy and consistent pop. So, alright, hope you enjoyed that. Can't wait to show you the test video. So you can see the difference. The Mark II has that opened. You can see the primer. The Mark I is rounded, and the primer is facing the other direction. So unless you hit a hard target, the Mark I won't go off. It has to be a hard target to force that primer to go off. The Mark II is different. It has pretty much the built-in pen. The pellet itself sets off the primer on impact. Just that force of it stopping so fast pushes the primer into the anvil, the base into the anvil, and sets off the primer itself, the explosion. So that's the big difference between the two. So there they are, side by side. You guys decide which is the best one, and we'll go with that. So right here, we have a Mark II from a previous shot about to get hit by a Mark II from a shot today, right there. So we shot it again, and these guys collided in the gel, as you can see. These are the two previous shots from the other day. This is the shot right now, and once again another success with that explosive pellet. The damage is pretty consistent. This was the aim point, so it's pretty well dialed in for that. So that was the Mark I into ballistics shell. The cavity is definitely bigger.
and that's because there's more pressure built up because of the seal. When it actually goes off, there's a seal going on between the pellet and the primer, so it's more like an actual little bomb. And you see that it's split in two. They both created their own little wound cavity right there, the pellet and the primer. The penetration, I would say it's just a little less than the actual Mark 1. With the Mark 2, there's a guaranteed separation. I mean, with the Mark 1, there's a guaranteed separation. Mark 2 is not a guaranteed separation. Most of the time, it actually stays together. When it leaves together, it'll stay together. But with the Mark 1, it's a guaranteed separation if the primer actually goes off, if it actually blows. So I'm just surprised it actually went off. Normally the Mark 1 doesn't go off in a soft target, and the blast is directed backwards, kind of like is directed back towards the shooter as opposed to forward towards the target. So there's a slight difference there. The yellowing is still bothering me right there. That chemical reaction, I gotta clean it out before it spreads it and infects all of the ballistics gel. But still not bad. That Mark 1 actually went off. Very surprising. Still, there's the whole view right there. It did cause more damage. I'll give the Mark 1 that. And I mean, both of these are of my own design, my own little creation. So it's not like I'm losing to somebody. The Mark 1 is better in some aspects. The Mark 2 is better in other aspects. I think the Mark 2 is better against actual critters because the explosion is directed towards the critter when it impacts.
You said
Sideways, go gang some.